Episode 54.
Anyway,
said Hermione, continuing their interrupted conversation as though a lump of wood had not just attacked them.
Slughorn's going to have a Christmas party, Harry, and there's no way you'll be able to wriggle out of this one because he actually asked me to check your free evening so he could be sure to have it on a night you can come.
Harry groaned. Meanwhile, Ron, who was attempting to burst the pod in the bowl by putting both hands on it, standing up and squashing it as hard as he could, said angrily, "And is this another party just for Slughorn's favourites, is it?"
"Just for the Slug Club, yes,"
said Hermione. The pod flew out from under Ron's fingers and hit the greenhouse glass, rebounding onto the back of Professor Sprout's head and knocking off her old patched hat. Harry went to retrieve the pod. When he got back, Hermione was saying,
"Look, I didn't make up the name Slug Club."
"Slug Club," repeated Ron with a sneer worthy of Malfoy. "It's pathetic. Well, I hope you enjoy your party. Why don't you try hooking up with McLaggen? Then Slughorn can make you King and Queen Slug."
"We're allowed to bring guests,"
said Hermione, who for some reason had turned a bright, boiling scarlet.
"And I was going to ask you to come, but if you think it's that stupid, then I won't bother."
Harry suddenly wished the pod had flown a little farther so that he need not have been sitting here with the pair of them. Unnoticed by either, he seized the bowl that contained the pod and began to try and open it by the noisiest and most energetic means he could think of. Unfortunately, he could still hear every word of their conversation. "You were going to ask me?" asked Ron in a completely different voice.
"Yes,"
said Hermione angrily.
"But obviously, if you'd rather I hooked up with McLaggen."
There was a pause while Harry continued to pound the resilient pod with a trowel. "No, I wouldn't," said Ron in a very quiet voice. Harry missed the pod, hit the bowl, and shattered it. "Reparo," he said hastily, poking the pieces with his wand, and the bowl sprang back together again. The crash, however, appeared to have awoken Ron and Hermione to Harry's presence. Hermione looked flustered and immediately started fussing about for her copy of Flesh-Eating Trees of the World to find out the correct way to juice Snargaloff pods. Ron, on the other hand, looked sheepish but also rather pleased with himself.
"Hand that over, Harry," said Hermione hurriedly. "It says we're supposed to puncture them with something sharp."
Harry passed her the pod in the bowl. He and Ron both snapped their goggles back over their eyes and dived once more for the stump. It was not as though he was really surprised, thought Harry, as he wrestled with a thorny vine intent upon throttling him. He had had an inkling that this might happen sooner or later, but he was not sure how he felt about it. He and Jo were now too embarrassed to look at each other, let alone talk to each other. What if Ron and Hermione started going out together, then split up? Could their friendship survive it? Harry remembered the few weeks when they had not been talking to each other in the third year. He had not enjoyed trying to bridge the distance between them. And then, what if they didn't split up? What if they became like Bill and Fleur, and it became excruciatingly embarrassing to be in their presence, so that he was shut out for good? "Gotcha!" yelled Ron, pulling a second pod from the stump just as Hermione managed to burst the first one open, so that the bowl was full of tubers wriggling like pale green worms. The rest of the lesson passed without further mention of Slughorn's party. Although Harry watched his two friends more closely over the next few days, Ron and Hermione did not seem any different, except that they were a little politer to each other than usual. Harry supposed he would just have to wait and see what happened under the influence of butterbeer in Slughorn's dimly lit room on the night of the party. In the meantime, however, he had more pressing worries. Katie Bell was still in St. Mungo's Hospital with no prospect of leaving, which meant that the promising Gryffindor team Harry had been training so carefully since September was one chaser short. He kept putting off replacing Katie in the hope that she would return, but their opening match against Slytherin was looming, and he finally had to accept that she would not be back in time to play. Harry did not think he could stand another full house tryout. With a sinking feeling that had little to do with Quidditch, he cornered Dean Thomas after Transfiguration one day. Most of the class had already left, although several twittering yellow birds were still zooming around the room, all of Hermione's creation. Nobody else had succeeded in conjuring so much as a feather from thin air. "Are you still interested in playing chaser?" "What? Yes, of course," said Dean excitedly. Over Dean's shoulder, Harry saw Seamus Finnegan slamming his books into his bag, looking sour. One of the reasons Harry would have preferred not to ask Dean to play was that he knew Seamus would not like it. On the other hand, he had to do what was best for the team, and Dean had outflown Seamus at the tryouts. "Well then, you're in," said Harry. "There's a practice tonight, 7 o'clock. "Right," said Dean. "Cheers, Harry. Blimey, I can't wait to tell Ginny." He sprinted out of the room, leaving Harry and Seamus alone together. An uncomfortable moment made no easier when a bird dropping landed on Seamus's head as one of Hermione's canaries whizzed over them. Seamus was not the only person disgruntled by the choice of Katie's substitute. There was much muttering in the common room about the fact that Harry had now chosen 2 of his classmates for the team. As Harry had endured much worse mutterings than this in his school career, he was not particularly bothered. But all the same, the pressure was increasing to provide a win in the upcoming match against Slytherin. If Gryffindor won, Harry knew that the whole house would forget that they had criticized him and swear that they had always known it was a great team. If they lost, well, Harry thought wryly, he had still endured worse mutterings. Harry had no reason to regret his choice once he saw Dean fly that evening. He worked well with Ginny and Demelza. The beaters, Peeks and Coot, were getting better all the time. The only problem was Ron. Harry had known all along that Ron was an inconsistent player who suffered from nerves and a lack of confidence. And unfortunately, the looming prospect of the opening game of the season seemed to have brought out all his old insecurities. After letting in 6 goals, most of them scored by Ginny, his technique became wilder and wilder until he finally punched an oncoming Demelza Robbins in the mouth. "It was an accident. I'm sorry, Demelza. Really sorry," Ron shouted after her as she zigzagged back to the ground, dripping blood everywhere. "I just panicked," Ginny said angrily, landing next to Demelza as examining her fat lip. "You prat, Ron. Look at the state of her." "I can fix that," said Harry, landing beside the 2 girls, pointing his wand at Demelza's mouth and saying, "Episky." "And Ginny, don't call Ron a prat. You're not the captain of this team." "Well, you seem too busy to call him a prat, and I thought someone should." Harry forced himself not to laugh. "In the air, everyone. Let's go." Overall, it was one of the worst practices they had had all term, though Harry did not feel that honesty was the best policy when they were this close to the match. "Good work, everyone. I think we'll flatten Slytherin," he said bracingly, and the chasers and beaters left the changing room looking reasonably happy with themselves. "I played like a sack of dragon dung," said Ron in a hollow voice when the door had swung shut behind Ginny. "No, you didn't," said Harry firmly. "You're the best keeper I tried out, Ron. Your only problem is nerves." He kept up a relentless flow of encouragement all the way back to the castle, and by the time they reached the 2nd floor, Ron was looking marginally more cheerful. When Harry pushed open the tapestry to take their usual shortcut up to Gryffindor Tower, however, they found themselves looking at Dean and Ginny, who were locked in a close embrace and kissing fiercely as though glued together.